Welcome to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlow. Where does Connecticut rank when it comes to doing business? CNBC is out with its 2026 America's Top States for Business study. We're breaking down the rankings with CBIA President and CEO Chris DiPentima. But before that conversation, we want to begin this episode with some of the top stories you may have missed. Connecticut's labor market added 1,500 jobs in June, according to a new report from the State Department of Labor. Key industries, including manufacturing, construction, and education, have seen strong growth so far this year. But the report also highlights long-term workforce challenges. Connecticut's unemployment rate is now a full point higher than the national average, and the labor force has shrunk by nearly 47,000 people over the last year. There's an important update for manufacturers with defense contracts. The Department of Defense has suspended the rollout of Phase 2 of its Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification program. The move halts a requirement that would have forced tens of thousands of defense contractors into costly third-party cybersecurity audits starting this November. The DoD has paused future CMMC milestones while it conducts a 60-day review of the entire program. Contractors still need to implement required security controls, and the Phase 1 self-assessment obligations do remain in place. Connecticut's effort to build a quantum economy just received a major boost. Quantum CT was named one of 12 winners nationwide of the National Science Foundation's Regional Innovation Engines competition. The public-private partnership, led by Yale and UConn, is spearheading Connecticut's efforts to advance quantum technology. The award provides an initial $15 million over 2 years, with the potential for up to $160 million over the next decade. The bracket is set for the 2026 Coolest Thing Made in Connecticut. 16 Connecticut-made products will go head-to-head in the third annual competition. From aerospace and medical innovations to fashion, food, and safety products, these finalists showcase the innovation, ingenuity, and impact of Connecticut manufacturing. Head to CBIA.com to check out the full bracket and follow along on our social media channels. Watch with News 8 as we spotlight the companies and products competing for this year's title. The first round of voting begins August 20th. You can stay on top of all of the state's business headlines and much more at CBIA.com. Let's turn now to those CNBC rankings. We're joined by CBIA President and CEO Chris DiPentima. Chris, welcome back to the BizCast.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be with you.
So tell me a little bit, if I'm, sitting here listening, we see there's a lot of reports out, a lot of studies that say, oh, Connecticut ranks this, this, and this. Why is the CNBC business ranking something Connecticut, specifically CBIA pays attention to?
It's the best ranking that's out there for a number of reasons. There's 10 different categories, so it gives you a breadth of how the state's doing. And while it's ranking the states for how they do for businesses and attracting businesses and retaining businesses, it really measures the state as a whole, cost of living, quality of life, so things that affect businesses and residents. It gives a lot of detailed data behind each ranking, so it's not subjective, it's very objective, and you could see how you're performing at micro levels across several years. And this year is pretty exciting. As you mentioned, we're top 23 or 23 overall, which is the highest ranking we've had in the 20-year history of the CNBC ranking, which is very important because, again, it is a very overall comprehensive ranking system.
Yeah, and the coverage of it too says, you look at some states, they say the kind of top 5 moves around a little bit, but somewhat stays the same. There were a number of states that they were mentioning that, this state's never going to be on the top, like California, for example. But why? What is that jump for Connecticut mean?
It shows where our progress has been, I think rightfully so. It shows progress in business friendliness, which has a lot to do with public-private partnerships, especially around permitting, streamlining permitting and regulations. We've seen lots of gains on the policy front in Connecticut over the past 3 or 4 years in permitting and regulation, starting with the Transfer Act a couple years ago now, which really was a big deal for transforming commercial properties in the state and allowing people to transact them much quicker, much easier. And then the permitting wins we've had at CBIA, working with the Department of Environmental and Energy Protection and the governor's office and the legislative bipartisan nature to get progress in permitting and regulatory reform, because it just takes too long to get things done in Connecticut for too many years. And so streamlining that has been really critical. More to come, but we've made progress there. And this is what a lot of other states look at around the country, is how fast can they get projects up and going.
And that business friendliness is something that Connecticut really hasn't been able to boast about before. While still there's a lot of ways to go, there's been some progress there.
I think huge progress. If you look pre-pandemic, there wasn't a lot of public-private partnerships happening in Connecticut, working together on the policy front of how we can move the needle to make things easier for the business community, and by making things easier for the business community, growing our economy so that our residents benefit. And credit to both the executive branch as well as the legislative branch, listening to the business community, understanding their concerns, prioritizing those concerns, and then taking some action on them, so making some progress. A lot of that came from the Foundation's Economic Action Plan that we did in 2024 that we released, and continuing to make progress off of those priorities, chipping away at what's driving some challenges in Connecticut, but sustaining what's doing well.
Now, other than also infrastructure, the economy also saw some gains. Where do you see that coming from?
I think that's a direct result of Connecticut's performance on gross domestic product, or what we call GDP. We've been in the top half of the country for the last couple of years, even higher than that some years. And so it's the output that we're seeing in Connecticut, the business resilience, the growth of our businesses in the state. That's generally driving the economy scorecard that CNBC uses as one of the 10 elements. And so the gains there, credit to the business community in these turbulent times, when coming out of COVID, workforce challenges, supply chain challenges, interest rates, tariffs. I mean, there's always something happening. It seems like every month that's a bit of a headwind for our businesses. They've been resilient. They figured out how to grow during these challenging times. And as a result, our GDP has grown, and Connecticut as an overall economy has grown. And the CNBC ranking shows that progress there, and that we continue to grow there. You're going to grow and improve in the overall scorecard.
I mean, this is certainly some momentum, especially kind of coming out of what I think for the business community was a pretty difficult legislative session. What do you see needs to be done to continue to build this momentum?
Well, awareness around this ranking improvement. There's a lot of folks out there celebrating the progress up to number 23 overall in the country. And while credit certainly should be given and people should be celebrating, be aware that those rankings are a result of things that happened a year or 2 years or 3 years ago. They're not a reflection of this past legislative session. They're too close in time. The results of what happened this legislative session won't be reflected until future scorecards. So realizing that some damage was probably done this last legislative session that could negatively impact the scorecard in the future, and that we need to focus on the things that help with the improvement, the business friendliness, the economic growth, and then work on the things that the scorecard shows we're clearly having challenges with, like workforce. It's an area that the businesses continue to struggle with. So I think as long as people understand the scorecard and what's driven the improvement in the scorecard and use it for the right purposes, then we'll continue to see that progress. A lot of it's coming from bipartisan policy solutions to help grow the economy overall, which helps the businesses and helps the residents.
So I want to stop you there, kind of pedal back a little bit. One of the words you just brought up was workforce. So that was one of the areas that Connecticut, we've always said Connecticut does have, that strong workforce. In this, specific research right now, Connecticut went from 8th to 25th. What's going on there, and what needs to be done, I guess, in the media and the long term?
That scoring accurately reflects the headwinds that Connecticut businesses and Connecticut overall is seeing in the workforce side of things. We've had 2 or 3 years now where we've had stagnant job growth, so basically no job growth at all since 2022. We have a labor force that continues to decline every month and thereby every year. The more people leaving the labor force than are coming into it because of an older demographics, older population. And at the same time, we have tens of thousands, right now about almost 90,000 job openings in the state of Connecticut. And this is a number we've had for several years now where we aren't able to fill these jobs. So when you add those elements as well as high unemployment, it clearly shows that our workforce is not the strength it once was. And we've always been top 10 in the CNBC rankings with workforce. And to fall that much, CNBC is clearly measuring things and saying, hey, Connecticut, you've got a real challenge here on the workforce side that while this is a nationwide issue with job growth has not been as great, you're worse than a lot of other states in the country and a lot of your other peers, especially in the higher cost, high state environment like Connecticut, where we really rely on our workforce. And so that's an eye opener, I think, hopefully for policymakers. It's something that we've been talking about CBIA for several years now, that this is an issue, it needs to be solved, but the solutions just haven't been there the past couple of years.
Yeah. Do you think it's the narrative has been built for so long about Connecticut's workforce? CBIA and other groups have been saying, hey, look, we're falling off. And now there's reports like this that are really pointing to no, the narrative has completely changed.
I think we rest on the laurels of our workforce. We're like, oh, we have the greatest workforce in the world. Nothing, don't change here, even though people have been talking about for years the silver tsunami. Hey, we're going to have a lot of people retire, and the knowledge is going to leave with them, and we need to do something to backfill that expertise, get the people into the workforce earlier, get them the knowledge earlier, and we just didn't do it for so long. And now there's a lot of solutions out there being talked about, some being addressed, like the Pathways Commission that we talked about last time, to help our high school students get connected to jobs earlier in their life, help them hopefully get that knowledge earlier in life, and then elevate up, and then more opportunities around workforce development to connect these people with these nearly 90,000 job openings. But we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to do it in a very quick period of time. That's clearly what the CNBC ranking is telling us.
And, looking at the ranking overall, kind of comparing us to other states, it's hard to compare it to Connecticut to everywhere. But at the same time, businesses are, when they decide where they're going to expand, they're looking not only even in their facilities that are in the U.S., but also globally. And that's something that we've heard, I think from a number of people involved in our organization. But how do you see those states that are at the top? In Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina?
A lot of them bipartisan collaboration, first and foremost. Some of them are blue states, some are red states, some are purple states, but they're working at a bipartisan nature. They're very aggressive on economic development. Ohio bringing in Intel and several other companies that are creating tens of thousands of jobs, as well as doing a good job retaining the companies that they're in their states. When you look at Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, the states that are in the top 5, they have real strong economic plans. They're not just doing that on a session by session or policy by policy basis. They have strategic ideas on how to grow the economy, how to keep their businesses happy, attract more businesses there, how to attract people to their state so they're growing the workforce. A lot of that goes back to affordability, having decent energy costs, having good housing costs, having good childcare costs. All those states show that you don't have to have the lowest costs in the country, but you have to have a fair cost for what the businesses and the residents expect that they're getting from your state. And that's why you've seen Ohio, which wasn't even the top 10 a few years back, now number 1 in the country. And we often talk about weather and climate in Connecticut. We can never be a top state because we don't have the sunshine that the Southeast or the Southwest has. Last time I checked, Ohio has the same weather pattern we do, which is cold in the winter, warm in the summer, but they've done it. They've been able to achieve the top state for doing businesses in the entire country because of their policy decisions, because they made it important and the priority to make sure their businesses stay there and they attract new businesses as well as the residents. And that's the key ingredients to growing your overall economy and being a top state for businesses.
Great, Chris. Well, we really appreciate your insights and look forward to seeing what can happen in the discussions over the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thanks for having me.
And you can find more about the CNBC rankings on our website, CBIA.com. That's a wrap on this week's BizCast. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, give us your feedback and let us know if there are any guests you'd like to hear from by emailing us at bizcast@cbia.com. And remember, you can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For a full list of episodes, head to CBIA.com.